A modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
She's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
When you look at the history of cinema, you realize how important it was when you look in countries like Russia, where cinema was used to push propaganda because the people could not read. Certain messages could be passed around, especially to young people, and people would be able to feel something based on the different types of edits. When we look at the times that we live in right now, the growth of platforms such as TikTok, the growth of platforms such as YouTube, all these things share the same thing, that all these things share the same concept, videos. And what videos do is they help us communicate and connect, right? We share a certain level of energy. And that is the true power of cinema. So when you look at movies, the one thing that movies do that platforms such as YouTube and TikTok do not do is they keep us engaged. So when you go watch a movie, you are in that room, you're locked in for be it 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. You're locked in, and there's no way that you can go. You've already paid. You've sort of prepared your mind to say, I'm going to come and sit and just listen. And in that moment, it's you experiencing the movie, depending on what platform you choose to watch it in, whether you're in IMAX, whether you are in D-Box, whether you have surround Adobe. I have no idea what they do in the cinema, but whatever experience you choose, right? And in that moment, you're allowing the storyteller to connect with you in a way, influencing how you see the world. And a lot of times, cinema is written from the perspective of the director, depending on their vision, and they're spreading a message. In every film, there's a message that's being spread that when you move out of the film, it affects how you see the real world. So when you go watch an Oppenheimer, you leave that with the questions of, damn, man, the atomic bomb, the processes that these scientists went through, the drama of these men knowing what could go wrong but choosing to do so, looking at the questions of what's the moral obligation? Should the Nazis have been let? Should the United States government have opened up the resources, their scientific knowledge and what would have happened if the Nazis had known, what would have happened if the Russians had known? Was it a good thing that they didn't keep? Why does America get to play Big Brother? These are questions that cinema asks of us, right? And we are only able to have this conversation because for 2 hours, we've allowed the filmmaker to speak to our conscious through the art and performance that's done in front of us. That is the true power of cinema. As filmmakers, as a filmmaker myself, sometimes I sit there and I'm writing and it's like, oh, whenever you're writing, they say you should write from the things that you know, the little short films we make. Everything is based off of what you know, but the theme of your movies is always based on how you see the world, right or wrong. And that is where things become weird and tricky. So if you've ever seen a movie where you're like, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with the message that's being sent, I don't agree. In most cases, if you look behind the scenes, you don't agree with the director's points of view. You don't agree with either the director's political inclines or the director's, whatever they believe in. And this comes across a lot. So a lot of times when you watch a lot of movies, the subtext, especially those written by Christian type of writers and directors, is they'll always have these biblical references within the movie. So there'll always be things that you'll be like, hey, this feels a little bit outdated. This feels a little bit like this, because that's what they believe in. And they'll put it in there because that's what they know. So where we're going with this video, where we're going with it is the next time you decide to go watch a movie, ask yourself, what did I learn from this? What's the purpose of this? And I want you to start to think about who's behind it. What's the influence? What's what's the intended desire. So a lot of movies, in order to make movies, you need budgets because it costs a lot of money to make film nowadays, right? It costs money to hire. If you want more people to watch your movie, you need a name celebrity. You need the latest equipment. You need a lot of things to work for you. So you find that, on a low budget movie, it'll be $12 million, and the thought of $12 million is like, this is a lot of money. But you have to look at who is financing that and what message are they driving. I watched the movie Sound of Freedom, and then when you look at the people who are backing it, at first it was backed by Fox, by Disney, and then it was backed by this group called the Angel Studios, who have evangelical propaganda. So you see a lot of about the movie. It involves a lot of God this, God that. It's a lot of Christianity within it. And then you look at a movie like Barbie, which is sponsored. I think Barbie belongs to Warner Brothers or Universal. I'm not quite sure, but it's one of these big studios. And then you see the amount of money that they put into it. It's like, I think it was over 105 to $300 million that was put into making this movie. And then you're asking yourself, what's the goal? If someone is putting 300 million, it's not out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they want a return. So the message that's sent within this movie has one to have a global reach, and it has to be able to relate to the people watching the film. So one of the main things and why I'm making this video, where I'm like, the true power of cinema. Cinema has the ability to give hope. Cinema has the ability to show people a different way, to educate where we do not know, where we are misinformed. Cinema has that. But the question is always about what's the integrity and what's the moral obligation of the person behind the camera. What are they trying to achieve and how much control do they have? We've seen with movies like Justice League, where you have the director's cut and you have the producer's cut. The producer's goal in most cases, especially if it's a studio, is to make back their money. That is their goal. So when that's the goal, how much of that do they care about the message that they're sending? Whether that message is good or bad. Nowadays, it's all about inclusion. It's all about, we live in a weird time politically, depending on which aisle you lean to. And within these moments that we live in, you have to be careful and you have to look at the politics behind the business that's promoting whatever movie you want to watch. And you have to ask yourself, before you go watch a movie, what is this movie trying to say? I say this to say there's a movie that's coming out called Snow White. It's a very scary movie because I, for one, grew up watching Snow White. I grew up reading about Snow White, and granted, there's a lot of issues within that where stereotypes people say that were in the story originally, but other than that, I thought it was a good story. I mean, it's a story about a girl and the queen who's jealous of this little girl and ends up cursing the little girl, and the girl has to be saved. And the only way to save her is by having a boy come and kiss her, and then she'll get her life back. And it was about true love. It's about somebody having true love and how love is the answer. And I've been watching a lot of videos being made by the actors, the lead actors within this movie, and how they've been talking about walking away from these messages that the story initially stood for, and they're switching it to it being about this girl becoming a true, powerful girl boss. And one thing that I fear that we now live in is we've gotten to a point whereby new cinema is not allowed. New stories are not allowed to be told. And part of that is because writers just basically don't live interesting lives, or the ones that do get to live interesting lives or do get the ability and opportunity to tell their stories, they live superficial lives that most of us cannot live. I'm in film school, and I'll tell you the cost of attending film school is not cheap. So eventually the people who get access and opportunity to tell stories do not live lives that a lot of people can relate to. The one thing that we could all relate to, rich or poor, is love. And the moment we start taking love away from cinema, we are setting ourselves up for disaster, in my own opinion. We are setting ourselves up for a scary future because we're setting ourselves up for tyranny. We're setting ourselves up for probably things with unintended consequences, you know. And this is not to say that women should not see themselves as girl bosses, but I think we need to set a balance. We need to set a realistic perspective of we live in a world where men and women share this planet, and we should be living in harmony, building and allowing our societies to grow. This divisive nature that we are headed towards, I feel like by the time we wake up and we realize what cinema has done, it will be too late, especially from a moral perspective. And I think that we really have to pay attention to what we watch, and we should hold people accountable to the stories that they put out, and especially the studios. And I think we have to be very careful, because if someone is putting $300 million into a terrible message, there will be consequences.
No White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign. I am.